In this presentation, I will review the works of Ruth Asawa, as well as the thesis and in-depth analysis of Jason Vartikar, who explores Asawa's works extensively in his essay, Ruth Asawa's Early Wire Sculpture and a Biology of Equality. As mentioned previously, this presentation works to focus attention on the thesis of Jason Vartikar. His statement is as follows. This essay argues that Asawa's biomorphic wire works evoke biology, specifically the proliferation of cells, embryos, and invertebrates from early epoch as a metaphor for racial equality. The sculptures complicate modern art's ideas of biomorphism, which emphasizes form and raw effect rather than the underlying content from biology. Ruth Asawa was an American modernist sculptor who explored the ideas of biology through her organic and natural forms. She attended Black Mountain College near Asheville, North Carolina, and during her first semester, she found an interest in biology, which was inspired by a class taught by Jane Verda, who expressed his art theories with biological terms. As we can see, her works are distinct as she created abstract forms which were brought to life by an acquired technique and use of wire mesh. This use of wire mesh as a primary medium in Asawa's work was cultivated during a school trip to Toluca, Mexico in 1947, where villagers taught Asawa the technique of crocheting wire into egg baskets, and within 2 years of her visit, Asawa began to close these woven baskets and created the structural technique she is known for. To further understand and appreciate Asawa's approach to her biomorphic forms, there must first be an understanding of the artist's background with biology and her ideas of race in both the everyday and within the art world. Vartikar explains Asawa's wishes to be separated from generalizations when it comes to the subject of race and gender, more specifically with her identity. In fact, she expresses these ideas in a letter she wrote to her future spouse, in which she states, "I no longer identify myself as Japanese or American, but as a citizen of the universe. I no longer want to nurse such wounds." It is important to note on the fact Asawa grew up during the attack of Pearl Harbor, and as a result, she along with her family witnessed the loss of her family's property, and were eventually incarcerated in War Relocation Center in rural Arkansas. She was permitted to leave the camp in 1943 to obtain a teaching certificate from Milwaukee State Teaching School. Though her time here came to a stop when she was advised to withdraw due to rampant prejudice against Japanese Americans, as this would potentially block her from acquiring an apprenticeship at a local school, and it wasn't until 1946 that she would arrive at Black Mountain College. Within the art world, Vartikar further explains how Asawa experienced critics who continued the ideas of race-based categorization and solely recognized Asawa's works based on her ethnic heritage as a Japanese American or by her gender as a woman. These actions further the idea of segregation among artists. Examples of this categorization included a writer for Time who labeled Asawa as a housewife making Oriental art. Another critic, this time from the New York Times, asserted that her works were bulbously symmetrical, woven brass objects dangling from the ceiling resembling Japanese fishing baskets. This sort of language was even witnessed by Asawa at Black Mountain, with one teacher praising her works to show an innate Oriental dexterity and industry. Because of these moments of racially and gender-driven recognition, it is understandable for Asawa to move towards not only wanting to completely separate herself from these ideas, but to portray her own ideas of biology within her work. Ideas which Vartikar argues to be an understanding of no one specific race being superior to another. Many of Asawa's works can be argued to have shown close resemblance to her drawings found within her biology notebooks. For instance, the left picture shows a grouping of overlapping plant cells, which render 5 circles filled with smaller circles. This suggests a small colony within the grouping. Vartikar describes the large circle to be the parent cell, while the 4 smaller circles to be the daughter cells. It is this specific drawing which shows a close relation to her sculpture, which can be found in the image to the right, containing Asawa's work entitled 1957. Using this crochet wire method, we can see the various size orbs overlapping each other in a rhythmic pattern that closely resembles the drawing to the left. Much like the works we saw in the previous slide, we see a distinct similarity in the 2 images featured in this slide. On the left, we see Asawa's drawing labeled Colorless Plant Yeast. It depicts 4 groupings of cells as ovals attached to smaller groupings. Each cell features a double border, which is filled with small pencil markings, implying cell walls that encircle nuclear material. In relation to the illustration, these patterns closely resemble Asawa's untitled work of 1952, featured just to the right. This specific work shows 8 lobes budding out from each other in a vertical formation. Despite its vertical formation, we still see the same chain-like structure that implies secession, just like in Asawa's illustrations. This would mean, like the orbs in Colorless Plant Yeast, the sculpture's 8 vertical lobes represent 1 parent cell atop, followed by 7 daughter cells. Along with repeated patterns, it is important to note on the metal tubing which connects a majority of her sculptural works. Vartikar then suggests, for instance, the image above, and considers the interconnectedness of the 8 cells, 1 being the parent and 7 being the daughter cells. Despite their clearly singular forms, they are still found bound by the metal tubing. This tubing could then suggest a hint to the origin of the word mitosis, this being the Greek word mitos, meaning thread. Asawa's untitled 1954 is unique as it is one of her first works to feature smaller lobes nestled within a larger lobe. Vartikar argues this sculpture to be an example of embryos in the stage of development, more specifically earlier than the blastula phase. Sculptural works as such were known to be continuous wire woven, which meant the wire from the outer lobe connected throughout the sculpture all the way into the most inner lobe. Vartikar goes on to suggest this specific technique mimics the basic structure of all embryos, yolk and white, showing the commonality of all races. Asawa also found inspiration for her wire sculptures when she was enrolled in a zoology course at the Milwaukee State Teachers College. It was here that Asawa would encounter textbooks containing biomorphic forms. And it was during this time in which Vartikar suggests that she would begin to create sculptures suggesting invertebrates. Specifically, we see this in her untitled 1954 sculpture. This sculpture features broad fronds of woven wire curling up as if it were pedaling in an upward direction. Vartikar also argues that this sculptural structure renders the likeness of a sea lily as it contains similar tentacles almost like a jellyfish. Vartikar makes a strong argument for his thesis as he demonstrated a close connected relationship between Asawa's wired sculptures and biological forms. His argument is also strong when considering Asawa's ideology when it comes to racial discrimination in the art world and Asawa's determination to argue all human beings are equal. Ruth Asawa's influential wire sculptures paved the way for how we now see organic forms, while also addressing racial issues she herself experienced. By taking inspiration from her own beliefs, coupled with her education in biology, Asawa created a new approach to how artists approach biology in the art field.